Are you looking for the perfect gift that celebrates Detroit and Michigan? I know from personal experience that you can find something special for everyone on your list at Citybird. Unique, thoughtful, and local, Citybird has it all. For instance, classic engraved neighborhood rocks glasses with your choice of one of 60 Detroit neighborhoods for just a touch of elegance. Citybird also offers a curated selection of jewelry, candles, home goods, and apparel by hundreds of local and independent makers. You can find that perfect gift for that special someone. And don't forget the cards. Here, let me tell you, the cards for any occasion are truly special. Visit Citybird today and make a new memory, not just by buying gifts, but by enjoying the city while you do it. Located in Detroit at 460 West Canfield, between Cass and 2nd Avenues in Midtown, or online at citybirddetroit.com. That's citybirddetroit.com. Hey everyone, and welcome to your Daily Detroit for Tuesday, April 16th, 2024. Today is a little bit of a special edition for you. We recorded this out at Capitol Park right after the official announcement that General Motors is moving their headquarters from the Ren Cen to Hudson's Detroit. Me and Runyan from Urbanized Detroit got together and talked about what's ahead, what we learned, and a whole lot more. And honestly, we'd love to hear your feedback too. dailydetroit@gmail.com. Over the next year, I think there's going to be a lot of discussion about what's going to happen to one of Detroit's most iconic spaces. All right, let's hop into that discussion with Runyan. How are you?
I'm good, Jer. How are you?
Absolutely great. So, we got our first look inside the new Hudson's Detroit, but also quite the press conference. I had a lot of flash. I feel like, though, I don't feel like I know that many more details than when I got there.
Yeah, so this morning we get the word, a press conference with Mary Barra and Dan Gilbert, so it's a big deal. And then Cranes broke the news that this would be GM moving into the new Hudson's Detroit and away from the Ren Center. We do not have a lot more to go with right now. We know it'll be next year. We know it'll be in the shorter building next to the skyscraper, which makes a lot of sense because when they released the renderings for that building a year or two ago, it had a lot of cars in it. There's a lot of event space and there's office space, so it makes a lot of sense for GM.
And I would note that in that teaser video for Hudson's Detroit, there was a big old Cadillac they superimposed on the side.
And also for the press conference, there were some very flashy vehicles outside on the sidewalk, so I would expect to see more of those in the future.
So the details we do know it's going to be 2025. We do know that it's going to be, they describe it as the top floors of the office tower. They're not very specific with any of this. Like, we don't have square footage. We don't have numbers of employees. I've seen different reports, south of 1,000, north of 1,000 employees. I have heard that there's been a lot of employee shifts from Detroit to Warren, to their tech center. Do you have kind of any triangulation on that?
I don't. I know some people who have worked in the Ren Cen. I know that they have shifted. They were going to do a certain amount of days and then, a few more days and then scaled back. So, we're not sure right now, and it might look different next year. And there's a flashy new building, so people might want to come to the office,
I wonder if that's part of the point, though, right? That whole let's encourage people to be back to work. If when people talk to us about development, they're always like, well, Class A will bring people back. The top-notch stuff will bring people back into the office. I wonder if this is kind of a push along those lines.
Yeah, the Ren Cen is the most recognizable building in Detroit, but it's not the most welcoming building in Detroit. It could use a refresh, which we're getting to in a minute. But yeah, I would guess that, if I worked for GM, I would think this is pretty cool news.
Yeah. So look, a lot of this, because we do have limited, full information, is there's just going to be a lot of bold speculation coming here because the Renaissance Center, as you said, is the most recognizable building in the city. It's also a lot of land. It's a lot of building. There are some issues. I mean, this thing, was built by, I want to say, Ford II. And it was always confusing, even with recent updates. I know GM says they put $1 billion into it and all this other stuff. Even with recent updates, this building has some fundamental issues. And it also it's at that age where without a major refresh, it doesn't necessarily make sense as far as technology and the outer envelope and all that stuff.
Yeah, and inside is, a lot of people like brutalism and some people don't get it at all, but it is hard to find your way around that building. I remember meeting one of my friends back in like 2015, the first time I met her, and she was like, I'm at this place in the Ren Center, and it was like during Jazz Festival, Labor Day. Jer, I don't know how the hell I found her. Like, honestly, I have zero idea how I actually found her because I have gotten lost plenty of times in that building, as most people have.
I used to know it because I had some friends that worked there, but once the retail and everything else mostly left, I lost all of my visual landmarks, and I just have no idea what I'm doing there, which gets me to the point of there are some businesses left in there. This cannot be good news for them.
No, but they do say GM is going to work with Bedrock and the city and the county for the next year to try to just figure out what to do with this stuff. I mean, obviously the hotel is fine. The hotel is doing great, but these other buildings, we need to figure it out. And I think a lot of people would really like that to be residential, like a strong residential component. I think there's a lot of opportunity here, and we're going to throw some ideas out there for people to consider.
For sure. And I think anything involving a rehab is also going to involve a bucket load of money and probably a bucket load of incentives too, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, these buildings need an update. So, yeah, definitely.
Okay. So when I posted this out on social media, there's just a whole gambit of things because people have so many emotional feelings about the Ren Cen. But one thing they kept over and over again was shopping, destination events, everything from a movie theater to like rock climbing to you name it, but a place that has a lot of the things that people feel are missing in like downtown Detroit and Detroit. What are your thoughts on that?
So here's one idea I'm going to throw out. I had a commenter today bring up something that every once in a while people will bring this up. We need to make part of the Ren Cen a destination for people. It's right on the riverfront. It's a great location. There was an idea floated around years ago about putting an aquarium along the riverfront. Let's do it. The opportunity is there. Let's do the aquarium. Get the kids there, get people to go. It's on the riverfront, perfect location. Let's do it.
So you're thinking something much bigger like, say, Shed as opposed to what we have on Belle Isle. When I refer to Shed in Chicago.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that's what people have in mind, too. The Belle Isle one is a beautiful little building, but it's a little building. So we need a place for people to go, yeah.
You could do something like with the Winter Garden where you just have like wall of fish on either side. That could be fun.
Sure. I mean, why not? The Winter Garden is actually, I think, one of the prettiest places and probably one of the most underrated places in the Ren Cen because it has this beautiful view of the river and Windsor. It's really pretty. So, yeah, and we could talk about possible, make it a retail destination as well. You had an idea earlier.
I did have an idea, and I think it's because it's the thing that like I constantly get messaged about. There is no doubt there is room not just for a city Target, but like you could put like the world's biggest Target in the Ren Cen. You could do multiple floors. You could put a giant Target logo at the top of it, and you could solve everybody's. The other thing a lot of people said was like supersized grocery store or something. Like, there's so much space in this thing.
I mean, the speculation is going to go on for another year, and hopefully some really good ideas come out of it, but they said this during the press conference. They have the best people working on it. Dan Gilbert can turn anything into a destination pretty much. The ideas that'll come out of it, I think, will be fun to watch.
For sure, especially when you've got something like the infinite money card. Residential, I mean, we could be thinking, if this were to actually happen, I feel like you could fit thousands of people in that.
Yeah, I mean, the new waterfront, the residences at Water Square, that has, 500 apartments in it? So, and that's, compared to the Ren Cen, there's so much room in the Ren Cen. So yeah, you could put a lot of space, a lot of residential space in there. I
do think there'll need to be some refactoring because at least some people I've talked to, some experts I've talked to, said that older commercial buildings are easier to retrofit to residential than newer ones because of the very large floor plates. Do you have any thoughts on that? You can kind of think about it in all those like loft conversions that have taken place all over the city, like these big spaces and what they're going to be doing over in Milwaukee Junction too with that giant factory and, putting apartments in what used to be, a very busy factory. So yeah, there's creative people working on it. I feel like if there's a will, there's a way. And if there's a opportunity, because if there's anything I feel like, and they mentioned this whole return, to hybrid work, the post-pandemic, all this other stuff. I feel like we really have to focus on residential going forward because that office market is just not going to be there. Even Stephen Ross and the District of Detroit backed down on their office plans after a while because they looked at it and then they just couldn't get the financing for the project.
Yeah, and I think that's probably what they're going to look at the most is residential because, people have gotten very comfortable in their apartments. And, if you have a cool new building that people want to go to, great, but they're going to need to look past office space at this point.
And another great amenity is, sure, you have connection with the People Mover, sure, you're next to Jefferson, but you literally can go downstairs and go run on the riverfront. How amazing would that be?
That's really cool. I mean, I think that's one of the top amenities there. I love being on the riverfront and just seeing all the different kinds of people down there and just getting that fresh air. And a lot of people who visit the city do that as well, just walk around. And it would be a great amenity for somebody who wanted to live there.
When I think about apartments in tall buildings, I think about things like the John Hancock Tower in Chicago, where they were able to put just so many places in that thing. And I think that this is the opportunity to bring in some of the density that I think the city really needs. I'm bold like this, but I think if you look at greater downtown, the 7.2 square miles, I feel like we could easily fit another 50 or 100,000 people in here if you build it right, if you build it densely, and I think that's the biggest opportunity for Detroit, not at detriment to the neighborhoods, but because of the simple fact that if we want people to move to Detroit, the city proper, I think Detroit needs to offer something that the suburbs don't. And I think that greater downtown has that ability, and something like the Ren Cen has that ability with everything right there.
Not only could they do it, they should do it. I mean, and that's what a lot of urbanists talk about all the time is density. And we need it to get money in the businesses down here and tax dollars for the city and just people on the street and, people walking around and engaging with what's going on here and people visiting. And there's a lot of opportunity in this structure. One
thing over the years that has struck me is that there is constant conversation between these leaders about various topics. And you noticed something in this press conference that they talked about that I think, one of the things I love is the random nuggets of information that we could get, whether it was, Warren Evans talking about the idea that this is going to benefit all of Wayne County, General Motors staying in the city. You noticed something else?
Yeah, so Mike Duggan was talking about meeting with Dan Gilbert about 6 years ago, and this was about the time that Ford had made their announcement with the train station as well. And Dan Gilbert said, he wanted to pitch, this building on the Hudson site to GM. So this has been in the works for a really long time. It's not just some, quick decision. And to have that foresight is pretty spectacular because they didn't need to move. They could just stay there, The pandemic had not happened yet. We didn't have this kind of office crisis that we have now. But yeah, he saw that it could be good really beneficial for everyone involved to do that.
It was good to see Dan Gilbert in person again. And I don't think we can discount the value of having Dan active. Look, there's lots of competent people at Bedrock, without a doubt, and throughout all of his organizations. But there is something about the guy, and seeing Dan just be back, at it again and getting in the mix again, I think is a huge sign for Detroit because he drives so much of things right now.
Yeah, it definitely was good to see him out again, and it's just hard to fathom what this city, especially downtown, would look like had he not come down here. It's hard to think about that. It would just be completely different. He's really done, what did Duggan say? There's nothing that, if somebody's going to reuse a building, figure out how to reuse a building. Dan Gilbert's the guy to do it.
100%. Well, I would love to hear what everyone else thinks. dailydetroit@gmail.com. 313-789-3211. Or, hop into the comments section at Urbanize Detroit, because I know that there's going to be a whole mess of content that you end up doing over the next year over this, I'm sure.
Yeah, for sure. And we have a very active commenting community over there. A lot of people who love to talk about the city and urbanism and stuff like that.
Awesome. Well, Robin Runyan, thank you for joining me in the park for an emergency podcast. I appreciate you.
Of course, it's a beautiful day. This is the place to be right now.
And we are done for today. Thank you so much for listening to Your Daily Detroit. If you've got feedback, dailydetroit@gmail.com. As always, we do this every single weekday. Do not forget to follow us in your favorite podcast app, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to shows. Remember that you are somebody, and we'll talk tomorrow.